Hi, my name is Dubé. I'm a medical anthropologist and senior researcher at Quebec National Institute of Public Health and an invited professor of anthropology at Laval University.
So today I will present you some of the challenges we face with our social media analytics in Canada and more specifically in Quebec. So first of all, a little bit about Quebec. So Quebec is the second largest Canadian province. It's where a quarter of the Canadian population lives. It's also where Céline Dion was born and where we eat poutine. But the main characteristic of Quebec is the fact that most Quebecers speak French as their main language, while in the rest of Canada, people are mostly English speaking. Quebec has also its own TV show, its own culture, and we often speak of two solitudes within Canada. Quebec is also sadly one of the Canadian provinces where there was the most cases of COVID. You can see here some data around COVID cases months by month. You see the first wave in April and March, and then we're currently in the second wave, and again, most cases in Canada are sadly in Quebec. So this slide shows you the number of cases per 1,000 inhabitants. You can see that the average in Quebec is way above the mean for the rest of Canada and the different other provinces. So this slide shows you the implementation of containment measures during the first and second wave. Since the first case in Canada back in February, there was a complete lockdown in the end of March, with schools and most businesses being closed. Then a reopening began in May and June, and some measures were relaxed over the summer. With the second wave that started in September, there was a reinforcement of some of the measures, like closures of bar and restaurant and restriction over social gathering. So as you must all already know, there's no cure or vaccine against COVID, and the only way to ensure COVID cases prevention is to make sure that people understand and follow recommended public health measures like mask wearing or hand washing. In that context, a principle of risk communication do apply, and one of the criteria is to listen and be responsive to specific public concerns. So in that context, what we are doing in Quebec is to regularly monitor the population attitudes and behavior around the pandemic using a panel web survey. So we did do daily survey from end of March to end of May. Now we're a frequency of 3 times a week since June, and our questionnaire has around 60 items to assess adoption of recommended measure, risk perception regarding COVID-19, opinions about the measure, but also impact of the pandemic on mental health, physical exercise, diet, alcohol and cannabis consumption, and revenue. Even though it's not directly related to the topic of the talk today, I thought it could be interesting to show you some of the findings of our survey. So you can see in this slide that we did classify our respondents based on their risk perception regarding COVID and their adoption of recommended measure. So from one part of the continuum, the left side, you see the careless respondent, representing 12% of our sample that perceive low risk of COVID-19, low adoption of recommended measure, and a high desire to get back to their normal life. At the other end of the continuum, we see the anxious respondents, representing 21% of the sample. So those are people that are very afraid of the disease, that have stopped most of their regular activities, even low-risk activities, and that believe that there's a strong need to enforce measure and that are really afraid. In the middle of the continuum, so those are the respondents that have a more or less risk perception that is aligned with the scientific view and that do follow recommended measure with different level of motivation. We are also doing social media analytics with the aim to assess opinions and sentiment regarding the pandemic and the containment measure in Quebec. We also aim to describe misinformation circulating in traditional and social media and to evaluate if public health messages are understood among social media users. So we learned over the course of this project that we were having one of the world leaders in French-speaking conspiracy theories. So this is a picture of Alexis Cossette-Trudel, who has his own YouTube and Facebook channel called Radio Québec, where he promotes QAnon theories and a rhetoric around the fact that he perceived the pandemic to be fake and to be a way used by government to increase their power and control over citizens. So of course this guy used the pandemic to increase and build his reach and make money over having a polarizing discourse. But the fact is that he has over 1,000 followers on YouTube and Facebook before being shut down because of his link with QAnon. Now he's moved into Twitter, but 1,000 followers in Quebec is a huge number given that we're 8 million of Quebecers. And when we look at the findings of our survey, we see that about a quarter of the respondents do adhere to some form of conspiracy theories. And of course, that's of concern because there's a link between adhering to conspiracy theory and not following recommended public health measure. And Alexis Cossette-Trudel was also involved in many of the protests against public health measure and is usually and heavily investing social media to promote misinformation around the pandemic. So in that context, we are working with Media Measurement, which is a communication firm that also works with WHO EpiWin team around the Infodemic to do social media analytics and to present us with a weekly digital intelligence report. So the approach is to analyze and quantify the information, right and wrong, in digital media discussing COVID-19 in Quebec. So we benefit from weekly summary reports to track and quantify weekly conversation trends and emerging citizen questions in the province. The report provides an overview of different topics in the context of COVID-19 that have engaged social media users based in Quebec. Those topics are grouped by different taxonomies that are relevant to the public health sector. The data collected for the study includes content publicly available on social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, blogs, and forums, as well as online news content, including broadcasts. And it's both French and English content that is monitored. So this slide presents you some of the findings of a typical weekly report when you can see the number of mentions and the number of questions around the different big categories that we're looking at. So the intervention, the illness, the treatment, and the type of information, the causes. This is a typical slide on a raising topic. Here we're thinking about misinformation. There was a huge peak in misinformation content because mostly of the shutdown of QAnon pages and the shutdown of Alexis Cossette-Trudel pages. So you see a typical report with Google search terms and a main or most commented finding. Another information that we can find on the dashboard we have is the number of mention and question day by day. So we could drill down the data and look specifically on a specific topic for a specific date period to see how this topic evolves over time. Here you can see some findings around misinformation and a sentiment for the week of October 18 to October 24, and you can see that anxiety and fear are the most prominent emotion related to misinformation. Now let's talk about some of the challenges we are facing, both technical challenges and more conceptual challenges. And I'll show you a short video of some of my colleagues that have worked on the Facebook data. You know that Facebook is quite protective of its data, but some of the public pages are very interesting if we want to look at the general public opinions. At least in Quebec, Facebook remains one of the top used social media among adults. but we need to do a lot of things before having the findings available.
Hi, my name is Fabienne Labbé, and I'm a scientific advisor in the infectious disease department at the Quebec Institut of Public Health.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Malo. I'm a research assistant in Dube's team.
One of the research projects that Eve, Benjamin, and I have been working on since the beginning of the pandemic has been the analysis of online discourses about COVID-19 in Quebec. The AI firm Media Measurement has been an incredible partner in this endeavor, but we have been personally responsible for collecting data on Facebook, which is the most popular social media platform in Quebec. Specifically, since March, we have been collecting data on public page on Facebook using Encapture. Encapture is an add-on of QRS and Vivo that works on Chrome and Internet Explorer. It allows you to capture content like web pages, Twitter feed, or Facebook posts for import and conversion into PDF and Excel file. Encapture works almost exclusively with Windows. Facebook is an amazing source of data, but collecting data on it using Encapture is not without challenges.
Despite Encapture being a useful tool, we faced and continue to face technical issues. First of all, Encapture relies on Facebook's API, Application Programming Interface, to collect data. It appears that Facebook is restricting the use of its API by third parties due to security concerns. We then don't have much control over what Encapture collects. Sometimes we can collect data of the past 6 months, while on other occasions we can only collect data of the past 2 days or even no data at all for some days or pages. All of this means that we must collect data regularly in a systematic way so that we can mitigate the risk of data gaps. In addition to this limit, we're also facing issues in terms of the size of the data collected. When Encapture files are exported into Excel sheets, there can be as many as 200,000 comments on some screened pages. Despite having fast computers or SSDs, such operation takes time. We collect data from 13 pages daily, and we estimate that the capture and exportation process take about 1 hour every day, depending on the number of comments. Finally, after collecting and exporting all this data, we're in front of a serious problem. On one side, the size of the data collected is rather heavy, and on the other side, there are duplicates because we screen those pages every day since we fear the loss of data. We can simply sort and analyze those files by hand. Such process would take quite some time. This is why we're working with AI firms, because they have stronger automated tools to make sense of this data.
Another challenge that we have is the number of data that we are collecting. So this is just one top rising topic for 1 week. You can see the big categories, but you can see also the under categories with a lot of information. Though that's truly interesting, but what can we do with that? How could we tackle the information that needs to be addressed by communication intervention and the other posts or comments that we could just leave as this? So to be able to make sense of these findings and identify misinformation or raising concern that needs to be addressed, we developed an algorithm. But before showing you the algorithm, I will present you briefly some of the medical residents that work with us on that topic.
Hello, my name is Shana Yagi and I work with Gabrielle Gelina. We're both medical school students in our 5th year, and as part of our clinical rotation in public health, we worked with Ms. Eve Dubé and Ms. Fabienne Labbé on the project of the mediatic waking currently occurring around the COVID-19. We were asked to elaborate an algorithm that would determine and evaluate the potential risk of a misinformation on the public health, and it would consequently help determine which misinformations need to be addressed more specifically by the public health authorities.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle, and as presented by my colleague Shanaya, we worked on an algorithm project for the NSPQ. So we wanted to tell you about a few difficulties we encountered while looking for information to base our criteria on for the algorithm. The first difficulty that was actually a major one to look for information, was the fact that infodemics is a really new subject, and there's not a lot of studies that are long-term based to tell us really the evolution of the spread of the misinformation on social media. Another difficulty we encountered was the fact that there's not a lot of numbers that have been told about in the studies about the spread of information on social medias. So we wanted to find a cutoff with a number, so more of a like quantitative criteria, and we weren't able to find one that was quite objective. And the last one was the fact that in almost all of the studies we had the same sentence that was really alike, which was telling us that we weren't able to predict behavior modification based on the spread of information on social media. So this part was kind of lacking and is offering us kind of a restraint on how we can predict social behavior modification based on the spread of social media information.
So this is the algorithm, and I know that it's small and it's written in French, but I'll walk you through the different steps that we have developed. And really the first criteria is to look at the potential impact of the content on people's behavior and attitudes toward the pandemic. If the answer is that there won't be any impact, for instance, we saw a lot of discussion in the past weeks around Halloween and whether children will be able to trick or treat this year. That's of interest because that's what people are discussing about, but there's no need for public health intervention in these discussions. If the answer is yes and their danger is imminent, then this needs another type of intervention from authorities to prevent something really bad to happen. Like in the spring in Quebec, we saw people burning down 5G towers because of a false belief that this was the cause of the pandemic. It's a bit outside of the scope of this project to prevent such action. But if we believe that there could be an impact on people's behavior and adherence to recommended measure, we also need to assess whether there's a high risk or a low risk of people changing behavior. If there's a low risk, we need to continue monitoring the situation over time and see how this is evolving. But if the risk is high, then we need to develop communication intervention to address this piece of misinformation. And that's where we had some discussion around defining some objective criteria to define what is a misinformation that needs immediate public health communication intervention. And that's where maybe some of you will have some input, and we're looking forward to have your comments after this training. But in the yellow box, some of the criteria that we did discuss about was some like the credibility of the source, the fact that change are easily accessible, a link with anger or mistrust, the fact that the misinformation is providing an explanation for something where we lack evidence-based information, so that could provide an explanation that will be sticky and difficult to address in the future. The fact that the same narrative is repeated in different platforms from different people. So all those criteria we think are important to assess the level of danger of a potential misinformation and the need for a public health communication intervention. Another big and important challenge that we face is that once we have identified some of misinformation or comments that need immediate communication intervention, what are the most effective tactics that we should implement? There's a lot of research out there, but there's no definitive action, and there's different intervention that could be possible, but that could be adapted to the type of misinformation we are facing. And that's really a challenge we have, and we are hoping that some of you will find creative solution to address this challenge, because there's a lot of scientific publication around this topic, but there's no clear guidance in who should spoke about this misinformation, how to correct that while not reinforcing, how to prevent backfire effects. So all those questions, I think, remains to be addressed in the context of the COVID pandemic.
Bonjour à tous, mon nom est Sarah Dussault, je suis conseillère en communication à l'Institut national de santé publique du Québec et je suis également responsable des médias sociaux. Pour vous mettre en contexte, depuis le début de la pandémie, nos médias sociaux ont gagné très rapidement en popularité. Plus concrètement, on a observé une augmentation de 50% de nos abonnés sur Twitter et sur Facebook. En lien avec l'infodémie, on a remarqué une très grande confusion des rôles entre les différents partenaires de santé publique, autant au niveau régional, gouvernemental et autres. Comme la santé publique n'a jamais été autant présente dans la société, c'est très difficile pour la population de savoir qui fait quoi. Donc souvent, on va nous attribuer faussement le rôle de décideur. Ensuite, les citoyens prennent dorénavant part aux discussions entourant nos enjeux de santé publique. On remarque qu'il y a des grappes de micro-influenceurs qui se sont créées. Il peut s'agir de journalistes ou même de citoyens qui, selon leur niche, profitent d'une très grande visibilité et influence auprès de leur réseau. Leurs abonnés leur font une confiance aveugle, ce qui peut parfois créer de la désinformation. Souvent aussi, en citoyen, on remarque que de faux débats prennent place sur les médias sociaux. Parfois, il va s'agir de théories du complot, d'autres fois, ça va porter sur de l'information qui a été rapportée différemment dans certains médias. Enfin, nous, de notre côté, c'est sûr que l'infodémie nous oblige dorénavant à consacrer une très grande partie de notre temps aux médias sociaux, chose qu'on ne faisait pas nécessairement avant, et à également assurer une très grande veille, ou du moins une veille beaucoup plus serrée de ce qui se dit sur nous. Donc, souvent, là, on doit intervenir et rectifier de la fausse information, chose qu'avant, on n'avait pas nécessairement à faire. Donc, disons que c'est une toute nouvelle réalité.
So to sum up, the monitoring of social media has provided us with valuable findings that often triangulates with what we are seeing in our regular survey, which reinforce the importance of having both approach to look at people's attitudes and behavior regarding the pandemic. In terms of next step, we will look back at what happened during the first wave to try to identify key learnings. For instance, I was talking about the 5G towers that were burned. We will look at these data and see if we could have been able to predict that with our regular monitoring to try to identify some key learnings and some step forward. But as mentioned, we are looking forward to receive help from this first cohort of unicorns, especially around how to translate the findings around social media analytics into concrete public health action. So thanks a lot for your attention and looking forward to have conversation with you in the future.